Welcome to The Interviewers, a podcast for experts and influencers with advice and tips for getting booked on podcasts. This show is brought to you by guestexpertsonair.com. Here's your host, Joseph Schinwald.
Welcome to today's episode for guest experts who want to jazz up their marketing with podcast appearances. Our guest today is John Starling. Hello, John.
Hey, how are you, Joseph?
It's great to have you on the show, John. Our topic for the show is the inner and outer game of podcast guesting. John Starling is a seasoned coaching leader and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience, delivering results for over 400 companies across a variety of sectors. He has been advising, consulting, and coaching CEOs, management teams, and their companies in growth, strategy, and human performance. John strives to help his clients define their markets, go-to-market strategies and tactics, and obviate factors limiting their achievement. Over the years, John has developed a keen understanding of not just growth strategy, marketing, and business development, but a deeper understanding of human nature and motivation that helps him give his clients an edge. He also is a partner and chief strategy officer at Clark Leadership and facilitates business owner and CEO mastermind groups. One of his true passions is founding and mentoring youth programs in the community, especially for inner city youth. So much to your biography. It's extensive. I left a lot of things out. But you have a wonderful website also. There is so much more to discover about your coaching and about your seminars and your business in growth as a growth advisor and professional life coaching. But today we will really narrow things down because you have a lot of interesting subjects to talk about. And one of the subjects is Abraham Maslow. And as most of the coaches, most of experts have studied Abraham Maslow and know how important he is in coaching work, in the work of an expert, and how important it is actually also for the inner and outer game for podcast guesting. And you have a different opinion about this. Abraham Maslow's work around the human hierarchy of needs is inspiring, you say, but potentially limiting. So I would like to know more about why you think it's limiting. That would be my first question.
Sure. And thanks again for having me, Joseph. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the work. I appreciate the work that you're doing, helping people move their game forward. Yeah, you're welcome. So I had a little bit non-traditional path, like a lot of entrepreneurs and coaches, and was in the military for a while and then went to university. And went to university and took, just your Psychology 101 course that everybody has to take. And that's when I was first introduced to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And immediately, my feeling, which has stuck with me all these many, many, many years now, is that it doesn't really make sense to me as a hierarchy. That the way Maslow presented it, I believe in the needs. I don't believe in them necessarily being hierarchical. And the way I like to explain it to people is, if you only think about it hierarchically, then and you have to have your physiological needs, your food, your water, your shelter, clothing, etc., and your safety needs squared away, and your love and belonging, and your esteem, and then you can finally reach some modicum of self-actualization. Then historical characters like Gandhi or Buddha or Jesus, they, by that standard, how did they ever become self-actualizing? Because they didn't have reliable access to food and water and all this kind of stuff. Buddha was a mendicant. He was just out begging in the streets. So how, if you follow Maslow's ideas as a hierarchy, how does Siddhartha, the wandering former prince who became a monk, who eventually became Buddha. How does he get from here to there? It just never sat right with me looking at it as a hierarchy. I look at it as more of a rubric where there's pieces actively happening in all of us at all times. And then the question is, where are the gaps? And this is what I coach my clients and myself, my family, anybody who will listen, is to identify the gap and then work to close the gap. So that's why I've worked with Maslow's hierarchy of needs a lot, and especially in the past couple of years, and developed a way for people to analyze their current relationship to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and see where are the gaps, and then they can bring their focus to it, because what we focus on
so
is what we get.
the traditional understanding of the hierarchies, as I recall, is that unless you have your physiological needs all met completely, you will not be interested in higher needs. And unless you're basically feeling safety and love and belonging, you cannot really go up and achieve esteem, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom, because that's not really, you're not interested in it yet, because you just have to fulfill first needs which are lower in the pyramid. And so then, of course, self-actualization would only come once you're basically a totally successful businessman with high self-esteem and status and recognition, and you say, this is not like this. It doesn't, one step doesn't require the other step. You see it more like it's interdependently connected. And when there are gaps, then the system basically is not flowing, because it's a system like everything else is a system in a system, right? And like the chakras, if you talk spirituality, right? It's a systems, these are energy centers, these are their own brains. But ultimately, it's all interconnected, and one does build on the other, yet they are completely working together in harmony. So where do you see gaps? For instance, if I have a strong drive to become a successful coach and expert, and so I need a visibility strategy, and I need a lot of self-confidence, of course, and self-esteem, because now with a visibility strategy, I have to actually be my message, and not just know my message and market my message. I have to be my message. But let's say I'm still struggling, and maybe I just had a divorce, maybe I have other problems, like even safety problems, or maybe even physiological problems, so that the hierarchy would actually then say that I have to first take care of the other problems before I become this successful coach or expert. So how would you approach this if you would see me as that person who has this lower level problems on the pyramid, yet wants to go and be his message, go and make money and be his message, and market it, and have all the self-confidence I can have, and have a visibility strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a good place to start with you, with me, with anybody, is authenticity, and to just start from where you really are. So if someone is, struggling low on the pyramid, that may not be a problem. I've been coached by monks living in Asia. They're very low on that pyramid, right? So I think figuring out where you are in relationship to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what stage you're at, or if you're like me, and sounds like you too, not necessarily looking at it as stages, but more of just sort of levels of each section, is making an accurate assessment in order to get your bearings, but also in order to be really authentic with people. And I think we also have to understand that coaching is such a big, all-encompassing word, and it just seems to get bigger every day, right? It seems like there's a coach for everything. So if someone is let's call it a success coach, someone's a success coach, and when you look at success coaches, typically they're defining that in and around money, assets, that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, I guess it would seem inauthentic if the success coach hadn't had financial success themselves. Sort of like, if I went to a strength and conditioning coach and the person was a 90-pound weakling, or 700 pounds overweight, I may not really, I may have to take what they tell me with a grain of salt. But one of the first questions that I ask clients, and that I ask other coaches, and any type of leaders that I work with, CEOs, et cetera, is, what's your gold standard? So back in the, America's history, the US was on the gold standard. There was gold in Fort Knox that backed our currency. And then in the early 70s, I guess it was, Nixon took the US off the gold standard. Some people are still on a gold standard. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. A lot of success coaches are on a gold standard, and they're helping other people become more successful. So this triangle from the bottom works very well for them, right? That they've gone through this and they're at the sort of top of the mountain and can rain wisdom down on everybody else who hasn't made as much money as them or whatever. But you'd be surprised when you really get down to it. A lot of people, their gold standard is helping other people. Their gold standard is helping people heal from the past. Their gold standard is leaving the environment better than they found it. There's a million gold standards out there once we get through the pretenses of quote unquote success. I look at my life and I consider myself a successful person. I've got more money than some people. I've got less money than other people, but it's not my gold standard. It's not what I judge myself by. What I judge myself by is how many people can I interact with, either through my business or through the youth programs that I've set up with, or my music, or any of the other things that I do, and help them move their thing forward. That's my gold standard.
Sorry.
I consider that. And then another question that's related is, what's your gold standard, and where are you leading people from? I work a lot with CEOs, and did probably 15 years of strategic planning for companies, and I still enjoy that stuff. And strategic planning is all about backward planning. It's, where do you want to be, and let's work back from there and figure out how to get there. And still interesting, but I tell you, I'm a lot more interested when I talk to leaders now, not in where they're trying to lead their company to the next 10 or 20 million dollars in revenue, or $100 million in revenue, or whatever, but where are you leading from? How are you showing up? You can use this triangle, you can identify the gaps and close the gaps on your personal Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's great. Well, to what end? Where are you leading from? And I think that's a question a lot of people are asking nowadays. And the people who are, because not everybody's a leader. Hopefully everybody practices self-leadership, but not everybody's in a leadership position. But the best of the best, the people that you want on your team, if you're a CEO, the people that you want on your team, they very much want to know where you're leading from. Because on the two part, if they don't like where you're going, well, they can go work for anybody. There's 8 billion people on the planet, but the Pareto principle still applies. It's the top 20% typically that are moving the ball forward for every organization in the world, from the PTA to the World Health Organization, et cetera. And those top 20%ers can work for anybody doing anything. So where you're going, but where you're coming from, I think that's what matters.
So for me, it's like just most of the experts and coaches, they would have actually run their own businesses. They have their course online. They have their consulting they charge for, and they have a book. They have this business around them, around their deep expertise, around their framework, and their compelling story. And what I see is, when you look at this hierarchy of needs, at the hierarchy, basically, it's like, it's basically talking about the self. It's it's referring to the self, and everybody has a different field of reference there. But so, it's like almost like when you are now ready to present your message and when you're ready to do your expertise and to grow your business, then you're kind of looking from the upper scale there, which says self-actualization or highest self-esteem, confident, and all this. You're looking down, and wherever you are there, wherever you are starting from, wherever you are, you might just be in safety needs, or you might just be in this very moment in, like a sense of connection, or you might just, you might have just, to go very extreme, you just bought this wonderful $500 Christian Dior suit, but you don't have a car yet, whatever it is. But you're looking basically from above down, and you say, because it's all yourself, right? And you say to yourself, come on up, you can, But from down up, you look and say, oh no, I would be an imposter, I would be, I'm not yet there, right? I mean, I want to coach $1 million business people, but I don't have them yet. I don't have this yet, whatever this is, but this is all happening in the same person, right? So my question is here, is this where you say where you are coming from? Or what did I misunderstand this?
Yeah, no, I think you got it, and you're drilling down into this really well. When I started my first company, this was a management consulting firm doing growth strategy. I had been a teacher for several years after the military and college, and then just quick story that I don't think has ever been recorded. I took a job as a chauffeur for a couple weeks when I came back from Asia teaching, and what I really wanted to do was get into marketing, advertising, growth strategy, etc. Took a job as a data entry clerk for an investment company. I quit on the first day. I couldn't do the work, and my values are I couldn't waste the guy's money, the owner's money. And long story short, he saw me for whoever it is that I am, wouldn't let me quit. He said, look, we've got about $100 million under management, and it's good. Well, we got one client. And if we lose this client, I got to send all these people home. Would you be my marketing director? That's actually what I wanted anyway, right? I said, sure. Well, a year later, I was the vice president of marketing and internet business. And I went to him and I resigned. And he accepted that. He gave me my first client, introduced me to my first client as a consultant, gave me a free office for about 90 days. And even formed my LLC, formed my legal corporation, right? As a thank you for what I had done for him. And there I was in a little rented apartment with my wife. And we put a money down on a house. And when it was all said and done, we had $20. Right. We were getting ready to move into the house. We had $20 to our name. And so if you look at where I was on the physiological needs on the scale, right? Oh, geez. Was worried about safety, employment, getting that next client. Yeah, the refrigerator was empty a lot of times. That's also how I grew up, right? But what I had was certainty, right? What I had was certainty and faith in myself. So that's what I would say to part one of what I would say to coaches who are looking up a steep mountain, right? And saying, okay, I want to get to a point of self-actualization and esteem, pardon me, and relatedness to where I can coach CEOs and high net worth individuals, et cetera. And the truth is, it just doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't work that way. There's, and you've probably heard this a million times, but there's three ways you can go through life. You can go through life, do, have, be, have, do, be, or be, do, have, right? So if I have a coaching certification, and what I do is I run this great marketing program, I'll be a top level coach. No, it doesn't work that way. You could still suck. You could still not help people reach their objectives. Well, if what I have is a nice office, and what I do is I do a lot of networking and blah, 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 I'll be successful. No, you won't. The way you can take those three words, be, do, have, and you can put them in any order you want. But I can tell you conclusively, especially if you're starting with nothing, which is exactly what I started with. I mean, I was the kid with a, single parent, living below the poverty level, went in the military, got the GI Bill, got through college that way, started my first business out of a spare bedroom, et cetera. And we've done well. And we've done well by helping other people do well. But I never had it that I had to get all the way to the top of that Maslow's hierarchy triangle in order to help other people. I was always pretty authentic with people about where I was. And so now to the part two part, here's the difference. And here's what makes coaching so cool when it's done by at least my standard, like when I've been coached and when I've coached people and got good feedback on it, when it's done well. And that is that if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a triangle, and just think of it as a mountain, right? The cool thing about coaching, unlike psychiatry, therapy, et cetera, and there's nothing wrong with either of those, and I've had both, right, at different points, and I've taught meditation and I've practiced meditation. People say, John, meditation or medication? My answer is yes, right? Therapy, psychiatry, or coaching? My answer is yes. It's a toolbox. You need what you need at the time. But when I look at the way that the psychiatric field and the psychology field typically relates to the client, it's very much that they are up at that self-actualized mountain, and the client is down at the bottom trying to figure out how to make it up that mountain, right? But the great thing about coaching is that there's two triangles. There's two mountains side by side, and the coach is on their mountain and you're on your mountain. And by the way, the coach may not be at that given moment in time at the top of their mountain. They might be struggling. They might have been worth $2, $3, $4, $5 million or something, and their wife got cancer with no national health care and wiped them out. So suddenly their physiological needs, their safety needs are shrinking by the day, right? But there's a level of authenticity there that this is like just where I am. There's a level of relatedness, right, between a coach and a coachee that I just haven't seen other places. So I think to put all that in, hopefully a neat package for your listeners, wherever you are, there you are, right? And coach from there. Whatever your office looks like, great. Whatever you're driving, great. Because I personally, and I've hired coaches off and on for years, been a coach for decades. I want the best person for the moment that I'm in and what I'm trying to achieve, period. Right? So think of it this way. You hear a lot in the workplace about, discrimination, et cetera. We want the best person for the job, regardless of sex, religion, race, gender, orientation, whatever. Well, same thing. CEOs are very, very, very smart people. And you can show up on your bicycle, or you can show up in your AMG Mercedes Benz, right? And if that Benz has you underwater, that CEO will probably know it, right? they will know that you're just posing. They don't care. A good CEO wants the best, regardless of race, religion, etc., and they want the best for their situation, regardless of what situation the coach is in. I was coaching multi-millionaires when I was not bankrupt, but what's the word? I was technically insolvent. I hadn't declared bankruptcy, but my second business failed. It was failing, right? I never declared bankruptcy, but I was drowning. Got a lot of help by some really good coaches and had a huge breakthrough. This is 20 years ago. But I never let that stop me. Like, well, geez, if I only had $1 million in the bank, I could coach millionaires. That's very have do be. If I had $1 million, I could do coaching and then I'll be rich. That's crazy talk, right? You just got to be who you are and be authentic. And as a consultant, the name of the game in consulting is there is no handbook. You have to be one chapter ahead of the client. That's how you stay in business as a consultant, right? You got to stay one chapter ahead of them. Well, in coaching, yeah, and you got to be really authentic when you've lost your place in the book. And that kind of authenticity builds trust, right? And they're not going to have a breakthrough every session. They're not going to come out of there with their head on fire every session. You're not there to perform. You're there to listen. You're there to learn. You're there to help them ask the right questions so they get good answers. There's value in that. And you don't have to be, I personally believe you don't have to be all the way up the mountain on that in order to do this kind of work, especially when, and I'm going to just, and I'll shut up after this. I know I've been going on for a long time, but especially when you keep this in mind, right? And this was told, this is a story told to me by an old friend who really started me down this path when I was still in the military. And he was one of my sergeants, and he got me reading Suzuki, the Zen monk, the Zen monk who sort of brought Zen to the West. And this wasn't in Suzuki's work, but Dan told me, he said, this young person's going up the mountain and sees this elderly person way up the path and scrambles up there just knowing they can learn something, right? And taps the elderly person on the shoulder and says, master. And the old person turns around, has this big stack of wood on their back, and says, master, what is enlightenment? And the old person crouches down and sets the wood down by their feet and stands up real straight and takes a deep breath. And for just a minute, the kid's like, is that it? And then realizes that, oh, that is it. So, okay, well, what comes after enlightenment? And the old person bends down and picks up the wood and puts it on their shoulder and keeps going up the mountain. There is no top. There's only plateaus. There is no top to the mountain. And successful people that society sees as successful, they know this and they don't know this. They keep going because they get to what they think is going to be the top. Well, I just sold my company, just made a bunch of money, right? Just won that great contract, right? And they get to the top, just bought my first BMW, right? They get to the top and they realize, oh, it's just a plateau. And there's some depression there. You know, it's like the old thing of the Olympic gold medalist on suicide watch, right? Because you've built your whole life to be about this achievement, and then you get it, and and then you've got to redefine your goals and recommit and keep going up that mountain, whatever it is, whatever your gold standard tells you it is that keeps you getting out of bed and keep putting one foot in front of the other every day. I like to think that at our best as human beings, it's caring for each other and empowering each other. That's,
I find this very enlightening, our dialogue, because I haven't thought that way. And I like it. For instance, that you are trying to be transparent and as best as you can, because really transparency, you're playing a role in business, correct? I mean, you cannot go into this world, into this society without your roles. But the roles are still transparent because, at least for you, because you relate them to your true self. And, when you struggle with this imposter syndrome, because you're really not yet there, or you're not anymore there. It happens to many people also. They've been all on the top, and now they're not on the top anymore, and they still go on with their business. But you see this variety, you see there's a discrepancy. But according to you, and this is what I like a lot in this conversation, is that if you have your gold standard, like, the standard, you have a standard, whatever that is. For me, it's values. I know what my values are. I know I respect other people's values. I honor my own values, even though they're very different many times. But my values, and that's what I bring to the table, so to speak, And this is my standard.
Yeah.
I will not deviate from it, because I make myself miserable if I don't esteem my own values in life. And I think that is the kind of intangible asset maybe we can bring into our roles that we play in business. And then this discrepancy, or what some people call the imposter syndrome, goes away, because you do not have to, as you say, you do not have to have a net value of $10 million in order to consult businesses or individuals with a net value of 10 million. That's not necessary at all. You have to be ahead of them in your expertise, and that's what you are. That's why you get hired. And then you are steps ahead. And ultimately, it's your transparency and your, in my opinion, my values, which get me the transparency and the respect from the clients.
Yeah. And let me just go back to one thing you said there, and just to illustrate the point. If you're the CEO of a $100 million company, for example, first of all, you're going to find very few coaches worth $100 million. So when we reverse the logic, right? It's like, some people are saying, God, I can't be a coach because, I'm trying to make my mortgage or whatever it is. Okay, well, extrapolate that out to $100 million companies. Does that mean that $100 million company CEOs and owners don't have coaches? No, they have coaches, but there isn't that kind of parity often. the thing that you said about your values as your gold standard, that's the equalizer, right? So if somebody were to make that calculation, let's bring it back down to earth and something more middle market for a second. 10-20 million dollar company CEO has a nice business in an industrial park outside of the city, and he looks out the window as this potential new coach comes calling, and the person's driving a beat up sort of beat up, late model car that's, obviously, not the newest thing or whatever. And they sit down in the conference room for that introductory meeting. The values alignment is the equalizer. So being authentic about your values, being authentic about who you are and what you stand for, right? Suddenly, if there's a fit, this person doesn't care what you drove up in. They just don't care, because this person's a coach and they're here to help me, and there's a values alignment. Got it. Yeah. Okay, cool. But one other quick distinction is just between consulting and coaching, just to be clear. When I said that, I think I was clear, with consulting, you always have to stay a step ahead of the client, right? But on the coaching side, and that's why I've really pivoted. I do very little strategic planning nowadays. Most of what I do is coaching CEOs and coaching what I call civilians, people that aren't associated with any company. And back to Maslow's hierarchy and where they are on that, CEOs, I have a standard corporate rate. But for civilians that I coach, I do it according to their net worth. Yeah, if their net worth is low, they pay low. If it's high, they pay high. But the consulting, you have to stay a step ahead. But on coaching, you don't. And the reason is because as a coach, we're not in the business of answers. That's for consultants. We're in the business of questions. If I'm sitting there supplying answers to a coaching client, I am failing as a coach. I may be winning as a consultant, and that's something that you have to establish early on, and you have to be able to fluidly, as an agreement with them, go back and forth. But I'm always clear with people when they're at an inflection point. Do you want me to coach you through this? If we can, that may or may not be possible. Or do you want me to offer you some advice or some consulting? And 90% of the time, they want to go through it as an iterative process of coaching so they can turn the light bulb on themselves, right? I'm just getting them in the room where they can find the light switch.
Yes, actually, going before I go to the next question, and then also
Sure.
We'll talk a little bit about your website, starlinggrowthadvisory.com, starlinggrowthadvisory.com. It will be in the show notes, where you can find out more about John, and you can, of course, also contact him there. Our topic, the inner and outer game of podcast guesting. So I was just realizing, while we were talking about this different angles, we can look at Maslow. We say Maslow or Maslow. I know there are both two ways actually we can say it. So I say Maslow. I think this is the American way, but it's actually a Russian name, Maslow, and even the Wikipedia speaks about the two possibilities. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think what we can take out from this as guest experts going on a podcast tour, being their message, and having to have that kind of visibility strategy and their worth, feeling that worth, that they are the message, that they are valuable in this conversation, that they have something incredibly to contribute, and that's their deep expertise, their unique angle, their field of reference. But I think what I learned here is that you can really trust your transparency if you have that kind of standard, the gold standard, let's say. But it's, in my opinion, it's the values you bring in, which are yours. They're just uniquely yours. Everybody's their own values. I discover them always when I think, what is my perfect day, my perfect week in the future, my perfect month? What is the perfect rest of my life, And that is really different from everybody else, Not everybody has this kind of ideas I have, and that's where I get my values from. And ultimately, if it's things like belonging, having fun, freedom, net worth, raising my net, whatever it is, it's unique, and you can trust that as something you can actually mirror and you can relate with your clientele also. I think the question for me right now is, because I analyzed your website, and before I go further, actually, I have to say that you created this incredible tool on your website, which is called, I hope I say it the right way, Biotential. Is this how you pronounce it? And that is where you put the Maslow's hierarchy through a software. You work together, developed it with Silver Crayon Labs, and you put it kind of in a spherical thing. Instead of the hierarchy, you have it like in a circle, in a sphere, where you can actually discover this blind spots, right? And ultimately, I think it's for free to use. It helps you visualize and analyze where you stand regarding the core issues that are central to every human's life. And it takes about 3 to 5 minutes to go through it. And it generates a custom pie chart graphic that visualizes your relationship to the core issues mentioned in the hierarchy of needs, along with an algorithmically generated analysis and set of observations, recommendations towards realizing your human growth potential. And you can discover your potential by being on the website, starlinggrowthadvisory.com, and then you will see the link. It says Biotential, and on the bottom. And I will also have it in the show notes. So just to say that before I go quickly to one more question, because you are, as a very successful person in the business world with CEOs, and you have 400 plus companies with consulting and growth coaching, I think personal growth. And you have this interesting video on your website where you talk about you put it in two circles. One is the asset growth, and the other one is the personal growth. And you are not interested in these two circles independently existing. You look at where they overlap. So there's on the left-hand side the asset growth, on the right-hand side the personal growth, and you want to help people to actually grow that overlap. Could you tell me more? Could you tell us more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we wrap, we go back to the potential one more time, because there's one more piece to it. But let me address this first. Within the context, right? Within the context of what is your gold standard, and for some people that's money. That's okay. Nothing wrong with it. As this one Buddhist teacher said to my friend in India once, she said, "Jonathan, money is just green energy." Right? So people can get hung up and be like, "Oh, money's dirty, money's evil." I had all that crap for years. Luckily, I had a good coach to coach me through it. So for some people, the assets are money or real estate or cars or all of the above, or anything that's not a financial liability. For some people, the assets are community, platform, right? Number of lives touched, right? It all depends on, in your case, values. People who share, think about this for a second. People who share your values, who also intersect with you in a business sense, right? You can learn from each other. You can grow from each other. You can help each other with your business practices. those are assets. Those are incredible assets, right? So that's the asset growth circle of the Venn diagram. Yeah, that's right. And when you look at, self-fulfilled or fulfilled people at the end of their lives, when they look back and they count their assets, that's what they're counting. It's a small person who is just, counting their wealth at the end of their life. I mean, we've all seen, the Dickens or read the Dickens books about that kind of stuff, Prince and the Pauper and Christmas Carol and all that. That's a miserable life. There's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with collecting assets. But if that's your only gold standard in life, I wish you a better life, And I'm not talking about you, I'm saying generally. Look on the other circle though, the personal growth, right? And some people invest in themselves personally. They invest in the education, the coaching, the books, the time, setting aside the time to work on themselves, right? To stay in what my mentor, one of my greatest mentors, Bill Clark, what he calls learning mode, to just stay in learning mode. Sometimes staying in learning mode actually costs you money, because that, especially for service providers like coaches, you're either selling or you're billing. Those are like sort of the two modes. Well, where does learning fit into that? Right? Well, it actually does get you further along in both of those. But it takes time, right? It takes time out of your time that you would be coaching people, or time that you would be out marketing, selling, finding the next client. Where those things come together is the relationship between the personal growth and the asset growth. Personal growth and the asset growth for a life well lived. That's not important to everybody. There are some people who have amassed great fortunes with very, very little personal introspection and have lived miserable lives. The people that I like to work with are the people who are totally cool with making money, might even want to do something really good with it, right? In their lifetime or after their lifetime. But one of the ways that they get there is investing in personal growth. And I see a relationship between the two. As these two circles cross over, it makes a Venn diagram. What I really like to work with people on is growing that part in the center.
Where it overlaps.
Right? Where it overlaps and expands. That's
we often see things so in isolation, right? We think about our personal growth and we think about our asset growth, and ultimately it's really all interconnected, and we have to find those connections, and we have to just see it as one. Because even if you're very successful, or even if you are the best playboy in the world, or even if you are almost a saintly person, and only living for others, ultimately I think all these things, if you don't have it really well integrated into your own self and your self-realization, it can become a revolving door. It becomes a revolving door, and so the Hinduism talks about this, and they are a little bit different there because they have these 4 stages of life, and and a successful businessman is just that. It's not like it's not necessarily the only thing in the world. Like often, in our culture, success is like such a buzzword. You could get sick of it. You hear it all the time. Everybody talks about success and success. And, it just also tells me one other thing. When we talk about the inner game and the outer game with regard to Maslow, Abraham Maslow, I think it's very important not to be needy. Do yourself in front of yourself, not to be needy. Because if I'm not needy, then I'm more grateful for everything I have. Then I don't feel such a discrepancy in my needs. Because you know what? I have enough. Here, I'm grateful, but I have so many things, right? Or even maybe you have a small family and not like, make pictures with 24 children and all this, but small family, but I'm very happy. I love my mother, there's my brother, or I have, I've had luck that I was studying a master's degree in this and that was my interest. And I did take the time. I did some troubles, whatever. So, becoming grateful for all these things without being needy. Because I always remember when I was young, when you go on a dating, spree, like you are 20 years old and you're learning dating, and it's fun because you're going out, and you learn every day something, right? And you have a lot of fun. But the point is, as soon as you show up in a needy way, you go home with nothing. You go home because nobody's interested in a needy person. And so the same thing, I believe, in front of you, because we talk about needs. So in front of you, if you are so needy about success that you define yourself only with it, and you talk all day long about it, and you only hang out with people who only talk about success. What is it actually? Can you define it? Well, everybody defines it differently. And then when you reach it, and the people who reach it, they're in this revolving door. They suddenly ask themselves, wow, this is all, now I'm going to my nice, a chalet in the mountains, and I built it so I can be happy there with my family and my wife, and I'm all alone now, whatever it is. Ultimately, I think it's good to not be needy in front of yourself, because that just shows that you are not yet on your way to self-realization, self-actualization, because that is, I think, very important. Anyway, I talked too much about it.
Well, no, you make a good point, and I think the question, though, if I were coaching a person in that situation, whether a client or another coach or whatever, is there's a line between acknowledging where you are and being authentic about it, right? But at the same time, not wallowing in it. And when we wallow in it and we just sort of show up as a victim or playing victim or whatever in the nobody wants that. Nobody wants to buy that, But acknowledging, when a client asks me, hey, how you doing? I actually tell them, right? Because now we're at again, that's me just acknowledging that I'm on my mountain and they're on their mountain. So, I would encourage people to be authentic. And yeah, you're right. They're not hiring us to hear our problems, right? But I want to tell you one quick story, very, very quickly, that really brings all of this together for me. Many, many years ago, I was visiting a company called Marlin Steel, and we're not a client, did not become a client. I was just visiting with the CEO, a guy named Drew Greenblatt. And this is a very successful SMB, small medium business in my hometown in Baltimore, Maryland. And they make all sorts of steel wire products, from bagel baskets to whatever. Super successful CEO. I want to tell you what this guy's gold standard is. We're walking through, we met in the office conference room, and we're walking through the shop floor of this big building he has. And he points over, and real quietly to me, he says, you see that fellow over there? Yeah. And this was a black man, probably mid-50s. And he was pushing a broom around his workstation. So just cleaning up his workstation. He said, that guy's going to retire a millionaire. That moment has always stuck with me. This guy's gold standard, right? Not just to make a good product, right? Not just to be somebody in the business community nationally as well as regionally. Great. Not just to make money for him and his family, but it was a point of pride for him and part of his values, his gold standard. And also, he said it as a matter of fact. Now, I don't know the behind. Did he have an ESOP or an ISOP? Do they do a matching 401k, whatever? But clear as day, he said, that guy's going to retire a millionaire. And I can tell you, I know, labor rates in Baltimore, that guy was not doing millionaire work, semi-skilled to, probably semi-skilled labor, right? That you could have a race to the bottom on, you could replace with a machine, whatever. But Drew had it that this guy was, gonna, when he finished, he was going to finish the game with some money in the bank.
Yeah.
And that's just always stuck with me. And that just brings all this together for me between personal growth, asset growth, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, leadership. That to me is leadership. Where are you leading from? Yes. Remember what we said earlier. Where are you leading from? You give me a guy like that, and man, I'll follow a guy like that anywhere. And that's my recommendation to fellow coaches and to CEOs. Think about where you're leading from, because if you're leading from the right place, boy, they will stick with you through thick and thin and help you reach your goals. And as Drew proved, totally.
Yeah, I think it's for me. It was in several management positions. I mean, the point here, and now in my business, I have again employees, and the point for me is really I would never ever criticize, honestly speaking, because I know how important it is to have the motivation of the people and how important it is to lead from the right position as equals. Because, whether they are working for me and I'm independent or I would be working for them, in a sense, we're just trying to have, to put our value forth, to do our service and to live our lives. There is, from the point of view of Maslow's needs, we all the same, But it's also interesting how different people are. And I think that's fantastic because you can see that person you just described. And then you see other people in the world and all kinds of people are doing business differently, leading from a different place. I think there's not one only standard. And because, of course, everybody has also different values. I wanted to ask you if you could once more tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you and how they can learn more about you with your website, because I will have it in the show notes, but my accent, from Austria is pretty heavy sometimes. And I think maybe people will understand better when you say the URL and when you maybe also mention again how they can learn more on your website about you and about this.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So my business and coaching and growth life actually happens a couple places. I do all of my personal coaching, my professional life coaching through my practice, which is Starling, like the bird, Starling, Starling Growth Advisory.com. And when I facilitate mastermind groups and I do executive coaching, I do all of that work now since January 1st with Clark Leadership, and that's clarkleadership.com. And Bill Clark is 80 years old now. Amazing person, circumnavigated the globe in a sailboat, sold 8 different companies, amazing human being all the way around. And he's my mentor, and I'm helping him transition the business so his work on this planet can continue. So that's those two categories, the personal through starlinggrowthadvisory.com and the business coaching and mastermind groups, which all happen online, by the way, at clarkleadership.com. But while we're on the topic of URLs, I wanted to point out you can find Potential at my starlinggrowthadvisory.com, but it also has its own URL, which is pie, like eating a slice of pie, Potential, TENTIAL.com, sort of like potential,
Okay.
but Potential. And like you said, it's free. It takes maybe 5 minutes, and you'll get a pie chart that will show you your current relationship to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and a report giving you some advice on what to do with that information. And it's free. And the only thing that we ask is if you want to be able to log back in at future dates, then just give us your email, because that's your login. And then you can log back in periodically. I have one user who logs in once a week. And what it does is we programmed it to actually track the 5 different areas of your relationship to Maslow's hierarchy of needs in a line graph. So you could see over 6 months, over a year, over 3 years, how your relationship to these issues changes over time. And that brings us all the way back to the beginning, where I was saying about identifying the gaps, whether that's in your in the goals that you're setting for yourself, or improving your relationship to love and belonging with your family and your friends and more intimate relationships, whatever. But we've set it up so you can visualize it, but you can also track it and visualize it over time. And it's free. It's our gift to the, our gift to the world. Well, it's Dr. Maslow's gift, and we're just, helping to keep those ideas in the space. And I want you to understand, because people might be like, why? What's the angle? The blah, blah, blah. We have a revenue model behind it, which I won't discuss now. For the future, it's not with selling any data or charging for the free version of it. But we have a corporate edition that we'll put out in a while. But the reason that we have it up, we built it, we support it, it's free, it will remain free, is, like I said earlier in the call, I grew up below the poverty line until my mom remarried when I was maybe 10 or 11. I know what it's like to be poor, right? The world is mostly poor people. And I know, having been to Cambodia, been to the Philippines, been around the world, I know that there's a lot of people out there that cannot afford a coach. I do my coaching based on net worth. Well, that's also on what quote unquote first world, which I don't like that term, but first world standards. But there's in Kenya, in Cambodia, in South America, there's kids that are walking, 3 miles each way to school, literally. And that's the only place there's internet, or to the library in the nearest city. And that's the only place that they have internet, or if they borrow somebody's phone or whatever. And I created Potential because I can't coach everybody, I'm one person, but I wanted to make it so there is a place to start a conversation with yourself, even if you can't afford a coach, and start a conversation about self-knowledge, self-awareness. Oh, wait, there's this, these 5 areas of life, these sort of make sense. Okay, I get that. And food's hard to come by here. And there's a militia down the street, and I don't feel safe. And my father was killed, and all this stuff that's going, they got nobody to process that with, right? But they can log on and they can take this eval and they can visualize it. That in and of itself, that they can see, oh yeah, this part's weak. And then they know where to put their effort, right? That this part is lower than that part. And then they get a free report. And it's customized. It's not super customized, but it's customized to dependent on their score. And then they get some basic advice, right? Even about things regarding substance abuse. And, if they're undermining their progress with substances, they can put their email in and just track it, right? Like, okay, I'm back in the city. I'm going to go do potential again. And then they're in a conversation. And this is what people say, what is potential? It's a conversation starter with yourself, right? Because not everybody's in a conversation with themselves about growth. If they were, the world would be a very different place, arguably a much better place. But to get them into that conversation, and all they need to have is access to the internet, right? And where that conversation goes, I don't know, but I think it's a good
Maslow's
place.
hierarchy of needs comes up in every textbook of every field of in universities. I mean, he's applicable, and it's very interesting. And then, of course, nowadays we know that a lot.
It's universal.
Yeah. Nowadays, I think.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
A lot of things which we thought of, they are physical, but they are now all intangible. I mean, intangible is the thing which is invisible, and that's sometimes, mostly nowadays, where we live in our world, is more applicable than the other way around. In former days, maybe, it was more important that you were really strong in the jungle, but nowadays, But as I said, we have, I think we came to the end of the podcast. It was excellent. I really learned a lot myself, and I think it was very valuable for our audience. So thank you, John. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you, Joseph. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And I got to say, you are an incredible interviewer. And we were sometimes when you're working with an interviewer, you're playing, I play music, and it's called straight time. You're just in 4/4 time, right? And we were playing jazz, and that was it was amazing to play jazz with you, because it was great rhythm, and it was sketchy, and there was solos, and it went far out, but it always came back to the root. And man, I'll play jazz with you anytime, brother. It was great. I totally enjoyed it. Let's do it again. You compare
a dialogue or an interview with music. I think it is very much like music. And in music, often, the pauses are more important, or the same important. They cannot be ignored. The pauses are super important in music, right? The silent sounds, when you that's right. Totally important.
Yeah.
The quiet tone, exactly. The quiet time. Also, I thank you, the audience, of course, the guest experts, for listening in. The recap of the show with bullet points are in the show notes with all the links mentioned during the interview. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe to have you here again for our next episode. Thank you and goodbye until we meet again.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Interviewers, brought to you by guestexpertsonair.com.